In the last section, we started putting together some of the very core elements of the client side of our application. We deleted all the boilerplate we got inside of our src directory, except for that register service worker file, and then we created a brand new index.js file. As a reminder, the create React app application is set up to assume that there is an index.js file inside of your src directory and that it is the root file of your application. So we did not pick the name index.js here at random. This is something that is enforced automatically by create React app. So we've now got the start of some boilerplate for our index.js file. We're going to continue in this section by creating our actual root component and then using the React DOM.render call to get that component to show up on the screen. After that, we'll then start to do some of the Redux setup, and then we'll continue with some of the React router setup as well. So let's get to it. I want to first start off by creating a sort of starter place for our app component inside of a new file. We'll import it into this index.js file and then use the React DOM.render call to actually show it. So I'm going to find my src directory. Inside of there, I'll make a new folder that's going to house all the different components that we're going to have inside of our application. I'm going to call this file, or excuse me, this folder, the components directory. And then inside of the components directory, I'll make a new file called app.js. Now notice I'm using a capital A here. In general, we're going to be using a very consistent naming strategy inside of our application, especially on the client side. If a given file is exporting a class or a React component of any type, be it a functional component or a class-based component, we will label it with a capital letter. But if the file returns just a function or just a series of functions or something like that, we will label it with a lowercase leading character. And so a good example of that would be like the index.js file. It's not exporting a component, so we use a lowercase letter. The app will export a component, so we're going to use uppercase A. Okay, so now inside the app component, we'll put down a little bit of boilerplate in here just to get started. So we'll import React from React at the top. We'll create our app component. For right now, we'll leave it as just a simple functional component. We will say that this thing is going to return a div that contains the text, hi there, and then we'll export the component at the very bottom. Okay, so again, kind of assuming that we're on the same page regarding React here, we have created a functional component. It returns a little bit of JSX. The JSX says that we want to create a div that contains the text, hi there. We then take that newly created component and export it at the very bottom of the file with the export default syntax. You'll also notice that we've kind of changed over from using require statements to using import statements at the top as well. As a reminder, we are now using import statements because on the front end, we are making use of Webpack and Babel, which gives us very easy access to ES 2015 modules. Whereas on the back end, we're making use of Node.js, which has really only good support for common JS modules right now, and common JS modules use the require syntax instead. Okay, so we'll save this file. We're now going to import it into the index.js file and then just make sure we can get it to show up on the screen. So inside of index.js, I will import app from components/app. We'll then show the app component. So we'll say app. Make sure that you use the JSX tags inside of here because React DOM.render expects a component instance, which we create by using the JSX tags. Then as a second argument, we have to provide a reference to an existing DOM node inside of our HTML document. Now inside of the client public directory, we get the very root index.html file that is used to house the React side of our application. So if we open up the index.html file, you'll see all this boilerplate HTML in here already. If we scroll on down to the body tag, you'll find the div with an ID of root. So this is going to be the very root div of our application, and it's going to be where we render our React application to. So essentially, as a second argument to the React DOM.render call, we have to pass a reference to this div right here. So to do so, I'll flip back over to the index.js file, and as a second argument, I'll pass in document.querySelector, And I'm going to give myself a new line here so that you can still see everything on the screen. And then we'll select that div with ID of root by saying #root, like so. Okay, so it looks like prettier collapsed it to one line anyways. Whatever, that's fine. All right, I think that we're ready to now test this out inside the browser and make sure that we've kind of got square one put away before we start to dive into the Redux stuff. So let's start our server back up and just verify that we can see the app component on the screen. We'll then take a break and continue with the Redux setup. So I'm going to flip back over to my console. It looks like those 3 modules that we installed have successfully been installed. Notice that we are still inside of our client directory, but to start up our server, we have to make sure that we are inside of our server directory. So I'm going to change back out to my server directory. And then once inside of here, I'll start up my server inside of development mode with the command npm run dev, like so. Okay, so it looks like we get a little bit of an error message here. So you might see an error message that says something like React script start and something like React scripts command not found. So if you see this at this point in time, it's totally fine. This is a little issue that we're going to fix up inside of our client-side application. If you do not see this issue, that's totally fine as well. It might be that the Create React app boilerplate has this all fixed up. So let's continue in the next section. We'll talk about why we are seeing this error message, and we'll talk about exactly how we're going to fix it. So, quick break, and I'll see you in the next section.